The email arrived just after sunset. No subject line. Just one sentence: Mr. Harlan Whitmore requests your presence for a brief meeting at the family estate. It wasn't signed with a name, just admin. Not Dad, not even your father. I read it twice. The wording was clipped, impersonal. It might as well have come from a law firm. Part of me wanted to delete it. Just hit archive and go back to pretending we still lived on separate planets. But I didn't. I stared at the screen for a full minute, then grabbed my keys. Driving up to that estate felt like approaching a courthouse. Same cold air. Same pit in the stomach. Last time I was there, the garden still had color. Now it all looked trimmed to death, manicured and joyless. I parked under the same oaks where I used to ride my bike. They hadn't changed. I had. Funny thing about walking into a place that once felt like home, it teaches you exactly how much you've been erased. Somewhere between the gate and the front door, I asked myself, am I walking into something? Or away from something? The foyer was silent. No music. No scent of dinner or even coffee. Just silence and the faint buzz of air conditioning. I stepped in. They were already there, seated like board members. My father, upright, unreadable. My mother, Velma, crossed legs and tight lips. My sister, Lorinda, not even pretending to smile. And a stranger in a tailored suit, legal pads and folders lined neatly in front of him. No one stood up. No "Hey, you look good," no "How have you been?" Just Velma's hand, a slight wave toward an empty chair across the table. Like I was a client. Or a problem. I sat down slowly, absorbing the setup: leather chairs, untouched water glasses, not a wrinkle in the carpet. This wasn't a conversation. This was a presentation. My father didn't look at me. He looked at the man next to him. We're streamlining some family structures, he began, voice flat. In light of recent evaluations, the trust has undergone revisions. The attorney nodded, slid a document my way. I didn't touch it. This is a formal waiver, he said, regarding your financial interest in the Whitmore Trust. I blinked. So I was invited here to be removed. No one denied it. Not even Lorinda, who once cried on my shoulder in a motel parking lot when her life fell apart. My father stayed silent. Velma adjusted her sleeve. You're simplifying, I said. Not restructuring. Velma's voice cut through the stillness. You've never shown aptitude for legacy, Sable. This isn't punishment. It's practicality. I wanted to laugh. Not the kind from humor, just the bitter kind, the one that clogs your throat. I looked at each of them, really looked. You think this is smart? I asked. Pretending like I haven't shown up every time you needed something? Her head tilted slightly. You've always been emotionally invested. That's not the same as being a strategic partner. They weren't just cutting me out. They were rewriting me. Like I never mattered. Like the nights I stayed after Dad's surgery never happened. Like driving Lorinda to detox and sitting outside for 3 hours didn't count. Like all those emergency contact forms they never read but always listed me on. Were just logistics. I stared at the pen they'd placed beside the document. Everything in me said to shove it back, to stand up and walk out. But something else, something colder, kept me in that chair. I picked it up. Clicked it once. Twice. They were watching. The lawyer pretending not to. I signed. Not because I agreed. Not because I surrendered. I signed because I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of watching me break. As I handed the papers back, my father spoke for the first time since I'd entered. "You'll never touch my money again." I smiled, tight, with no joy. "That's the point, isn't it?" I stood. My mother's lips moved slightly, like she wanted to say something, but didn't. As I reached the door, I heard the attorney murmur something to my father. This should keep things quiet. Quiet. That was the goal all along. Erase me, shut the door, pretend I was never part of the blueprint. But what they forgot is, quiet isn't the same as gone. The ride home was quiet, but my mind wasn't. Every word from that meeting ricocheted inside my skull, refusing to settle. "You've never shown the capacity." That one stuck the hardest. Like a splinter under skin, tiny, but impossible to ignore. I pulled into my spot at the apartment complex. Beige concrete, cracked pavement, and a flickering light overhead. Not a mansion, not a family estate, just mine. As I killed the engine, I noticed my hands trembling on the steering wheel. Not from cold. Not from fear. Just too much. I slammed the door harder than I meant to. The echo bounced off the brick walls. I didn't care. Let the neighbors think what they want. Inside, everything felt too still. My chest tight, jaw clenched. It wasn't even anger. It was weight. A suffocating heaviness pressing behind my ribs. That kind of betrayal? It doesn't scream. It leaks, slow and steady, until you realize you've been drowning while smiling through dinners. There's something about being betrayed by family, it hits different. Lovers break your heart, but family makes you question if you were ever real to them at all. I sat on the edge of the couch, not even bothering to take off my shoes. My body moved, but my mind was somewhere else, 10 years ago, give or take. Lorinda's DUI. She was hysterical when I got the call. I dropped everything. Used my savings to get her a decent lawyer. Stood beside her in court. Told the family I had it handled so they wouldn't worry. They didn't worry. They didn't ask. They just moved on like it was all part of some invisible contract. Then Dad's hip surgery. 3 weeks of rides, meds, checkups. I rearranged my work schedule, took unpaid leave. Sat beside his bed while he dozed through daytime TV. He never said thanks. Mom told me, it's just what daughters do. You do enough of those things, it becomes a pattern. You become invisible in plain sight. I used to think they just weren't good at expressing gratitude. But tonight, I realized they never saw it as giving. They saw it as duty. No favors, no kindness, just expectation. The purse I'd tossed onto the cushion earlier was now staring at me like a loaded weapon. I reached in and pulled out the envelope, the one I'd signed at the estate. I unfolded it slowly. The paper was smooth, expensive, and reeked of finality. I read it again, slower this time. And that's when I saw it. Buried in the fine print, Clause 17, Subsection C, retroactive revocation of beneficiary rights pertaining to properties currently or formerly held in the name of Sable Whitmore. My grandmother's cottage. The one she left to me, in writing, before she passed. They'd included that. Erased it. This wasn't about streamlining. This was a hit job. I laughed. It wasn't joyful. It was the kind of laugh that comes when you finally see the game and realize you've been playing the wrong sport. They planned me out of existence, I said aloud. And they did it like professionals. My phone buzzed on the table. One new message. Lorinda. It's done. Please don't cause more drama. You know how fragile Mom is. I stared at the words. Fragile? I whispered. She's not fragile. She's just practiced. There's a special kind of manipulation in families like mine. They use words like drama as shields. Not because you're wrong, but because they don't want to be held accountable. I didn't text back. Just opened the drawer beside me and tossed the phone in. If they wanted silence, they'd get it, for now. But not the kind they expected. I got up, went to the nightstand, pulled out the old leather journal I hadn't touched in over a year. Its spine cracked as I flipped through pages filled with scribbles, dates, notes. Things I'd noticed but never had the nerve to speak aloud. There it was. March 2019. Dad withdrew $15,000 from Grandma's property sale. Promised to repay within 6 months. Never did. I stared at the line. My handwriting, my memory. I wasn't just the helper. I'd been the fallback. The one they bled when they needed a transfusion. And now they were done. Maybe I wasn't losing my mind. Maybe I'd just been gaslit long enough to question its existence. I closed the journal, set it down, and breathed deep. Not anger. Not yet. Just acknowledgement. A tiny spark. Walking into the kitchen, I poured a glass of water. Something normal. Something mine. As I turned to leave the room, my elbow brushed a small pile of unopened letters on the counter. One slipped off the stack and landed face up. Property tax notice, delinquent. I picked it up. My name. My address. My grandmother's house. I thought I had nothing left, I whispered. Turns out, they were still stealing, just quieter now. I stayed up late into the night, the glow of my laptop harsh against the dark. I'd typed Whitmore Trust records into countless search bars, but came up with nothing. No deed records, no mention of transfers under my grandmother's name. I leaned back in the chair and held my head in my hands. She had left that house to me, she said so clearly in her letters. The next morning, I stood in the county records office. Beige walls, fluorescent lights humming above me. The clerk typed, frowned, then looked at me like I was crazy. There's no listing under that name, she said. But there is a transfer to Whitmore Holdings LLC, filed 2 weeks after Mrs. Whitmore passed, signatures that mimic yours. A pause. My heart thundered. The property had vanished at their mercy. They'd slipped the deed out from under me. Twist S5 revealed, a shell LLC, fake signatures. They didn't just remove me. They masked their tracks. In that moment, betrayal cooled into focus. They weren't bumblers. They were precision operators. Identity theft. Elder betrayal. Family terror masquerading as paperwork. Later, I met Regina, my college roommate turned real estate attorney, at her office. She looked at the documents I'd forwarded. The way she scanned clauses, cross-checked dates, it wasn't just support. It was validation. They tried to bury this, she said, but there's enough here to contest. I asked her, how long did they plan this? She met my eyes and answered, long enough to think you'd never look. I listened. Took notes. She found a mortgage record filed under the same LLC, millions borrowed, collateral tied to that house. Money funneled sideways, likely into Lorinda's spa chain. I felt bile rise. They used my grandmother's legacy as a bank slip. I returned home, exhausted but wired. I opened the journal I carried. Page after page, inconsistencies, dates I logged, odd withdrawals I dismissed. One entry, November 2018, father withdrew funds from Silent Trust. I flipped pages until I found a note from when I was 22, scrawled in shaky ink, "You're not like Lorinda. You don't need attention." I reread it, bitter. At the time, I accepted it as modest praise. Now I see it was dismissal. I shook my head. I was never the quiet one. I was the erased one, and I let them sketch over my edges. I went to my closet and found that wooden music box. Its veneer cracked. I wound it and listened, the same lullaby Grandma played at the will reading. The melody felt like a whisper in a storm. I held it tight. They said she left me nothing. But she left this, and the house, I muttered. The lullaby echoed across my ribs like promise. I set it on the desk beside my computer. It couldn't fight for me, but it could remind me what I'm fighting for. Then I opened my banking app. Scrolling through recent transactions, I froze at one entry, a wire from my account to a clinic services address. Dated just days after I signed the waiver at the estate. I closed my eyes. Their theft wasn't just financial. It was personal, invasive. They used my name to pay for their secrets. They never planned to stop. The screen glared back at me, transaction complete. Clinic name, date, amount. I'd stared at it for so long, the numbers no longer looked real. It was still my bank account. Still my name. I scrolled up, scrolled down. Nothing in my memory clicked. Was it a donation? A bill I forgot? I tapped the clinic's number, waited, then heard the dull tone of protocol. We can't confirm any details unless you are the listed patient or power of attorney. Power of attorney. That phrase hit me like a stone. I hung up. And sat still. A thought whispered, maybe I did authorize this. Maybe I just forgot. I let that doubt linger too long. I'd learned how to do that, question my gut, downplay my suspicion. Survival skill, passed down like china plates. I could still hear my mother from years back, sitting across from me with a glass of Chardonnay. "Don't make things harder than they are," she said. "We always do what's best for the family." Was this best? Charging secret bills to my name? To a place that wouldn't even acknowledge me? 2 days later, I sat at the corner booth of a cafe off West Mary Street. Coffee cold. Eyes heavier than I'd admit. That's when Lorinda walked in like she belonged there. Not a call, not a knock, just her, with her perfect blowout and overpriced scarf. She smiled like nothing had happened. "Hey, sis," she said. "We heard you've been digging." I didn't answer. She slid into the booth, uninvited. "You know how fragile Dad is. And Mom, God, she barely sleeps these days." She paused. "You really want to reopen all those wounds?" Then she said it. The clinic was necessary. She was unraveling. Not me. She. That's when I knew. They didn't just write me off, they tried to have me declared unstable. Probably had their attorney file motions behind my back. Conservatorship? Guardianship? Something that stripped my rights without ever facing me. She reached into her bag and placed a check on the table. No words, just slid it across, like this was hush money. I didn't touch it. I stood up. "You don't get to tell me who I was," I said. "And you definitely don't get to pay me for silence." I walked out without looking back. Left the check sitting there, like a dirty napkin. Later that night, back in my apartment, I paced in silence. I thought about calling Regina. I wanted to ask her about false mental health claims, how to prove coercion. But I didn't call. Instead, I opened my journal. I wrote the words, "If I speak, they'll twist it. If I stay silent, they'll win." Then I flipped to a clean page. Began listing facts. Dates. Bank statements. Conversations. All of it. Not for court, at least not yet. But for me. To stop them from rewriting me. That was the first time I stopped documenting for proof and started writing for truth. I sat on the bed, holding the music box in my lap. Wound it. Let the melody play. Same notes. But now, it didn't sound like grief. It sounded like grit. You saw them, didn't you? I whispered to no one. Maybe to Grandma. You knew who they were. I scribbled in my journal again, "I am not the broken one." Then I wrote it again. And again. Until the pen ran dry. I looked up conservatorship abuse cases. Read about women my age, smart, sane, erased. Buried under lies spun by their own families. It was always the same story, she was unraveling. No one asked what thread had been pulled. Just as I began typing an email to request probate files from the county office, my phone buzzed. Blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. The voice that played back was sharp, steady. Familiar. "I know what you're trying to do," my father said. "You won't win." I sat in the driver's seat after that voicemail. Over and over, I played the voice of my father. Flat. Controlled. "You won't win." It echoed through the screens of my mind. I could feel the cars quiet around me, like the world had paused and listened. That wasn't a warning. It was confirmation, he was watching. In that moment, panic flared. My heart pounded in my temples. How did he know I was requesting probate files? Who told him I was poking around? I thought my email was locked. I realized maybe it wasn't. I made a decision, create a burner laptop, a clean email, secure. Start fresh in secret. There's a time in families like mine when being paranoid is the only safe mode. They'd always called me dramatic for raising questions. Now, it felt like foresight. I met Regina later in the afternoon in a co-working space. Soft lighting, low hum of conversation around us. The shift from a polished law office made me feel less exposed. We reviewed what I had. She leaned across the table and said, "You can't get a restraining order, there's no physical threat. But in civil court, you have options." I nodded. She sighed. "If you push forward, they'll make it messy. Ugly stories, surprise filings, threats. You'll need more than proof. You'll need endurance." My throat tightened. I said, "I don't have to win by their rules. I just need to stop losing in mine." Regina suggested a cease and desist to freeze further identity use while we built the case. I agreed. I also asked her to help me collect testimonial statements, friends, family, anyone who'd seen offhand comments, patterns over the years. That night was when the twist struck. I sat with my bank statements, Regina over video, light from my screen flickering across my face. My eyes caught an entry, $7,574. Label, Emergency Health Fund Transfer. My mouth went dry. That account was supposed to be dormant, something set up years ago, in my name. But the entry was recent. I froze. And then I saw it, co-managed with my father's power of attorney, a clause buried in old trust documents. Without my consent. They pulled it out. Weeks before the meeting at the estate, they drained the account. That meeting was never a choice. It was a rubber stamp. I sat back, disgust and relief tangled together. Relief because I wasn't paranoid. I was a target. Disgust because the target had been me all along. I grabbed a pen and notebook, scribbling timestamps, account numbers, names of bank officers. I hit record on my phone. A private video log, just in case something happened. I whispered words I'd practiced in my mind, whatever love they claimed it died when my silence stopped being useful. I thought about the girl I used to be, who believed things could be repaired. Would she believe me now? Maybe not. That part of me died long ago. But the part of me that's left is not about reconciliation. It's about preservation. Not revenge. Self-defense. Madeline's voice echoed in my memory, break your silence. They'll break your heart anyway. I noted it down. I stepped outside to check my mailbox, late evening, still warm in Texas. In the slot, an unmarked envelope. No return address. I pulled it out. Inside, one sheet, printed in bold red letters, revoked. My name. My social security number. My date of birth. Struck out. Revoked. They didn't need guns. A signature they never asked. That's how they break you. I stood in the hallway of my building, the envelope still in my hand. Revoked. My name, my birth date, all struck through in red. I thought I understood how far they'd go, but this was something different. They hadn't just tried to cut me out. They were actively erasing me. It stopped being symbolic. This was an attack. My breath came shallow. I could hear my pulse in my ears. For a moment, I wasn't angry, I was stunned. The kind of stun that makes your limbs heavy. But underneath it, something darker curled up. A decision. No more reaction. Action. I grabbed my phone and typed 3 words to Regina, meet me now. No greeting. No explanation. We both knew there wasn't time left to play polite. Driving through Austin midday, I could feel the shift. I wasn't scared of what they'd do. I was angry at what I'd allowed. A memory pulled itself up from somewhere long buried, me at 16, standing at one of those endless Whitmore banquets. Lorinda was being toasted for something trivial, another ribbon, another spotlight. I was nearby, clearing glasses, unnoticed. I remembered thinking, maybe if I'm useful, they'll keep me. Standing in the present, I whispered to no one, I won't fade again. It didn't feel brave. It felt overdue. I headed toward a small cafe off Barton Springs, a place I knew Jovi had been frequenting since she was forced off family property. I hadn't planned on seeing her, but fate didn't care for plans. There she was, Jovi, eyes red, clutching a canvas bag. And behind her, a man I recognized as one of my father's assistants, hand gripping her arm. You're no longer welcome, he said, low and stern. I didn't think. I stepped forward. Let her go, I demanded. My voice echoed. Tables fell silent. He turned, tense. Recognition flashed over his face. This is family business, he warned. Then say it out loud, I shot back. Tell this whole room what family does. A beat passed. He released her. She stumbled free. Every eye in that cafe was glued to us. For once, I didn't shrink. I stood there, shoulders squared, letting them all see. I wasn't protecting Jovi alone. I was reclaiming my own visibility. Outside, I walked her to a bench. She trembled. "I shouldn't have called you," she muttered. "You didn't," I replied. "I just got here first." She wiped her face. Whispered, I heard them talking, Lorinda and Delroy. They said they were cleansing the family name. They said you were already handled. Handled? I repeated. She nodded. They said you'd be quiet like always. That phrase, like always, burned in my chest. Maybe once, that would have been true. I pulled out my phone and asked for everything she remembered. Dates, comments, places. She gave me details. I sent them straight to Regina. Evidence, living, breathing evidence. No more secrets. By sunset, I was back home. My desk was buried, documents, notes, recordings. I wasn't hiding it anymore. If they came for me, they'd see how ready I was. My phone buzzed on the table. A message from an unknown number. "Stop exposing us, or you'll regret what we can do beyond courts." I stood still, staring at the words. They were no longer warning me. They were declaring war. And I finally realized fear wasn't my enemy. Silence was. The boardroom smelled like stale coffee and legal threats. Cold, sterile air conditioning pushed down on the room like it was trying to keep the truth from rising. I stepped in, my folder tight in my grip, and for a second, I felt like I was walking into a trap wearing a target on my chest. Delroy, Lorinda, Velma, Harlan. All sitting around the long mahogany table like they were royalty holding court. 2 outside investors I didn't recognize. Lawyers on either end. Nobody made room. I didn't sit. Velma didn't look at me. Lorinda gave me that same flat-lipped smile she always wore when she thought she was winning. "This is just a clarification meeting," Delroy said. I didn't respond. I opened my folder slowly, placed it in front of me on the table, but didn't flip it open yet. Regina's words looped in my head, "They'll throw everything to discredit you. Smile when they try." So I did. A projector flickered to life behind them. A slide appeared, founders and equity shareholders. Velma's name. Lorinda's name. Harlan. Even a minor cousin listed as advisory. But me? I wasn't on it. Nowhere. Not even a mention. Not even a footnote. Lorinda cleared her throat, rehearsed. Mother's vision planted the seed. The rest was execution. As with most legacies, it evolved. I felt the heat rise up from my stomach, but I didn't blink. "I'd like to see the original documents," I said. Delroy's lawyer chimed in quickly. "All records on file are current and compliant." I raised an eyebrow. I didn't ask if they were compliant. I asked if they were original. I looked around the room. Half the investors were fidgeting. Someone whispered. "They rewrote history," I said. "You didn't evolve the vision. You reassigned it, while I was still standing in the same room you tried to write me out of." No one answered. Because they knew. Velma stood. Finally looked at me. She didn't yell. That would have been honest. Instead, she pivoted to the investors. Sometimes, she began, hands folded like a preacher's wife, what looks like neglect is protection. What looks like exclusion is safety. We all have to make hard choices in leadership. Then she looked straight at me. If you had to choose between two children, one silent, one loud, which would you carry forward? Gasps were muffled. A lawyer cleared his throat. Velma didn't flinch. I swallowed hard. That question wasn't about love. It was strategy. It painted me as disruption. It painted her as the martyr. And I saw heads nod. She didn't just cut me out. She made them believe it was mercy. I didn't shout. I opened my folder. One by one, I laid out the evidence, photocopies of founding proposals, co-signed checks, early email threads, company bank transfers, ghost LLC filings where money had passed through names they claimed never existed. Who signed these? I asked. No answer. I pointed to a transfer made on a date when I was supposedly on a sabbatical. The signature on the document was Velma's. The funds came from an account in my name. One investor leaned forward. Who authorized this change in equity structure? Lorinda's voice faltered. That was reviewed by internal counsel. A thin, nervous answer. Harlan looked like he wanted to melt into his chair. The firm's lawyer spoke up. We believe these matters were handled appropriately under the family's governance agreement. I stepped closer. Belief isn't law. And governance doesn't grant theft. I watched it unfold. In real time, the room fractured. Some people avoided my eyes. Others looked at Velma now with a different kind of curiosity, one that came with liability. As they all tried to regain footing, my phone buzzed in my blazer pocket. I didn't check it immediately. Instead, I stared at my mother. Really stared. And for once, her face didn't hold power. It held panic. When I stepped out of the building 15 minutes later, I finally looked at my phone. SEC alert. A compliance review had been triggered under irregular ownership restructuring. I didn't smile. But I did whisper, so low only I could hear it, your silence didn't protect you. It protected me. I got there before the courthouse even opened. Regina pulled up just a few minutes later, coffee in one hand, case binder in the other. Neither of us said much. What was there to say? I had the documents. I had the names, the transfers, the timeline. And today, I was finally standing in front of people who had the power to undo what they'd done. My hands trembled just enough to annoy me. I clenched them inside my coat pockets until I felt warmth again. Not courage, just heat. The media trucks were already in position. A few cameras flashed as I walked in. They didn't shout questions. Just clicks and silence. It was a small mercy. Inside, the courtroom was as tense as a hung jury. My family was seated together like a polished ornament, Delray whispering to his lawyer, Lorinda checking her phone like it was a brunch meeting, Velma quiet. Cold. Regal. I held the folder against my chest and told myself one thing, this isn't revenge. This is reclamation. When the judge asked if there were new disclosures, I stood. I have something the court hasn't seen. And I handed over the contract. Drafted in my name. Never disclosed. Buried in a shell company's filing cabinet, masked by language so convoluted it took Regina and 2 interns days to decode. This contract was signed under the assumption I'd never read it, I said. But it invalidates the equity transfers made without my release. It was silent, but it wasn't peaceful. You could feel the shift, investors whispering behind cupped hands, Delroy stiffening, Lorinda paling. I kept going. They counted on confusion. They bet on me being too quiet for too long. And then, something happened that caught me off guard. I sat back down, heart still racing, and from the back of the courtroom, a voice I hadn't heard in 2 years spoke. I can confirm the timeline she's provided. I saw the emails. I was there when the accounts were accessed. I turned. Gideon. He looked older, tired maybe, but steady. The court officer hesitated, but the judge nodded him forward. He gave a brief, composed statement. No theatrics. Just confirmation. Dates. Locations. 2 moments where I'd told him something that matched evidence they now had in writing. Regina glanced over at me, eyebrows raised. Even she hadn't seen that coming. I nodded once to Gideon. He didn't smile. He just sat down quietly and didn't look at my parents. When it came time for closing remarks, the courtroom buzz had dropped to near silence. I stood again. No folder. No notes. I'm not here to plead for a seat at their table. I'm here to pull the receipts they hid under it. I'm not chasing their approval. I'm reclaiming what they stole while they called it love. My voice didn't shake. My legs didn't buckle. I didn't blink toward Velma. I turned to the judge and finished with this. I am no longer begging for what was mine. I am here to reclaim it. That line sat in the air like a verdict before the actual verdict came. There were no claps. No gasps. Just silence that said everything. Court adjourned temporarily. Outside, flashes exploded as the doors opened. I didn't stop. I didn't wave. Back in the car, Regina took a call from our litigation analyst. I scrolled through messages. One came from a blocked number. We didn't think you'd come this far. I stared at it, then locked the phone. No anger. No fear. They thought I'd fold. They thought I'd beg. I gave them neither. The courthouse looked different that morning. Not physically, but in the way it settled in my chest, less like a battleground, more like a doorway. Light poured through the front windows, catching in the polished floors. I walked in without needing to look over my shoulder. Cordelia and Wendell were already seated. Her hair was perfect, as always. His suit was a shade too expensive for the mood. They didn't look at me. I didn't offer it either. Some silences were earned. My lawyer laid out the file. Aunt Loretta's envelope, sealed, dated, now part of the official record. A quiet crack in a long-locked door. The benches behind us filled with unfamiliar faces, old neighbors, 2 of my dad's cousins I hadn't seen since high school graduation. Even a local reporter scribbling into a notepad like this was the city council, not a family falling apart under oath. I remembered Loretta's words before I left her porch, if you go in angry, you let them write the ending. So I sat still. Not bitter. Not triumphant. Just ready. When the judge entered, the air tightened. No smile. No preamble. Then Wendell stood. Didn't ask permission. Just rose, hands flat on the table. I don't have a statement, he said, voice a little shaky. But I do have a memory. Our father, he feared weakness more than he feared being wrong. We inherited that. No apology. But also no spin. Just something real. Cordelia didn't blink. But her heel tapped, soft, rhythmic. Like a metronome. Or a warning. The judge looked at him for a long beat. That may be the first honest thing said in this room. No one spoke. You could hear the court recorder's fingers still for half a second before picking back up. Then the judge turned to me. You were brought here under a false pretense, she said. But you showed what legacy really means. It's not wealth. It's truth. She declared the trust restored. Full recognition of my share. No contest. But she didn't stop there. Given the manipulation and attempts to erase you, the court mandates reconciliation sessions. Not just for healing, but for acknowledgement. The courtroom stirred. Even Cordelia blinked. The gavel dropped. And the knot that had lived inside me for years, finally let go. Outside, microphones angled my way. I didn't dodge them. I said what I needed to. Money wasn't the wound. Being erased was. And today, that ends. I didn't go home right away. I walked to the city garden. Sat at Grandpa's old bench, the one we used to stop at after church when I was little. The rain was barely misting, enough to keep the tourists away. I sat there. No tears. Just breath. Loretta texted, proud of you. Now live. I replied with a picture of the bench. At home, I pulled the court documents from my bag and placed them in the old memory box tucked under my bed. Next to it, I laid a photo of me, maybe 8, sitting on Grandpa's shoulders at the county fair. I closed the lid. A knock at the door broke the quiet. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it slow. A girl stood there, 12, maybe. Brown hair, backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes just like my brother's when we were kids. You Ms. Easton? I nodded, cautious. I'm Clara. My mom said. You're my aunt. I didn't move. Just breathed in. The story they tried to bury was done. But a new one, hers, was waiting.